Okay, so you have to send me that.
Your
Promise.
mind is going to go like this.
Crazy.
Yeah. I'm so happy that you're as obsessed with food as I am. It's like
I am too. It's fun to talk about things that are actually like interesting too.
Yeah, exactly.
You always wear it on podcasts. You're like, what are we
Right.
going to talk about? Myself,
Right.
God Almighty. Why?
Right. Yeah. I'm going to make you do that a little bit.
Okay.
I know. As boring as you are to you, you're interesting to other people. So that's the part you gotta. And one thing that I love, part of the reason that I love sport is that every person's journey in sport is by definition unique, which is fascinating.
Yeah, that's wow. That's a really good point. There's no one line or to the success that you find or the lessons, and
doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what's, because the sport might be, I mean, all sports are unique. Figure skating and judo, totally different. And then there's always a connection. And then there's, I'll start by sort of beginning to explain a little bit what I know about you.
Okay.
And then you can tell me what I missed and screwed up, and educate me on what I got wrong and go from there. So today I'm with Jadene Ferriera. And so you're a, let's see, personal performance coach, national level choreographer for over 15 years for skating. You have a degree in psychology, and you got the Coach Achievement Award from Canada, Skate Canada in 2018. And I'm guessing there's lots of other things that I missed or don't have fully. So I'd love for you to explain a little bit about yourself.
Well, I fell in love with art and music and dancing from the beginning of being on this planet. And I had no idea that it could turn into a career or it could turn into any kind of service for anybody, because nobody says in their business plan, well, you're just going to wave your arms around and make money and feed yourself. But somehow I did that and created a whole career in choreography over the last 20 years in figure skating. So it's morphed now into much more business consulting and so on, because I'm realizing that the skill set that I created with pulling art out of people is the same that you do when you're pulling out business ideas or confidence or branding. And so it's really fun now to take this whole idea of skating success to another level.
Right. And so you started in dance and then got into figure skating. Is that the...
Yeah. So funny story about that. My mom is British and then emigrated to the US as a 13-year-old and then married a Canadian. So by the time she ended up in Canada, she was like, okay, I better get the culture right, Right. And she basically looked around and saw that most people knew how to skate. And she thought that if I didn't learn, I would be like kind of a loser, like, right. People make fun of me or something. Right. So she was pulling me out of dance class on certain nights of the week to do skating. And I was appalled. I just thought, why would you do that to me? Like, I'm going to have a career in dancing. Why are you doing this to my poor body, freezing me and so on? Right. And of course, what happened is the coach was like, oh, she's so talented. She can do all this stuff, because my dance training was already kind of in effect, I guess. Mm-hmm. And eventually I learned to love it, but it did take me some time because I was kind of resentful of this whole pause in my ballerina career that I thought I was going to have. So,
right. Yeah. I'm that kid. I never played hockey growing up. And so I can technically skate, and I'm hoping one day in my life to be able to skate backwards, but.
Oh, I will teach you.
Okay.
Perfect. I can even teach you on Zoom to do it.
Really? Okay. Yeah. You might have to do that, because I don't know how. So that's one thing I'm hoping to get to one day in life. And we have lots of ice in Yellowknife for like about 13 months out of 12. We've got ice, I think. So there's lots of opportunity for me to learn how to do it here.
I love
so,
it.
Yeah. So then, so I guess from that point of, and the other part that's interesting, that obviously it's really funny. My dad used to tell me, for instance, I'm a judo coach. I've been coaching for 15 years, but when I went to school for sound engineering.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And so you do that, and then you don't do that, right?
Yeah.
I don't become a sound engineer. And I thought, what a waste of time and money. And then my dad just said, well, it's always tools that you're just putting in your toolbox, and you never know when you might utilize it again. And then years later, I end up getting to commentate the Olympics for CBC, and I'm in a studio using microphones. And then
amazing.
We end up, the Sport North asks me to create a podcast that we're doing, as well as the Judo Association that I'm executive director of decided to do that. And all of a sudden I'm using microphones and sort of and never would have put that together. And so in the same way, figure skating is a lot of dancing on ice. There's definitely tricks and incredible maneuvers that people do, but it's solo dancing, and then you have pair figure skating, which is dancing on ice as well. So it's so connected that way.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right about those skill sets coming in handy later, right? Like I was taking my psychology degree in Toronto at York University, and sitting in classrooms and sort of like furrowed brow, trying to understand that how all the jargon I was learning was actually going to help people, because my whole point in taking this degree was to help people. And I would go to the rink after and do my, at that point, side hustle, which I had no idea I was really creating a whole career out of, but working with young people and helping them with their choreography. Well, a 12-year-old that comes to the rink after school, they don't just park their brain, they bring all their problems to the rink. And so before I could get any kind of artistic stuff out of them, it was like, we got to deal with the friends that are being annoying. We got to deal with the boyfriend breakups. We got to deal with my mom and dad don't understand me. And there it was. It was like, oh, this is preventative psychology. This is a place where I can actually use tools ahead of time and get young athletes to find their own authentic empowerment and deal with things early on in life so that they get on a different trajectory and they don't have to come to therapy at 55. So it was a really cool, switch and flip in my mind of how that tool set should and could be utilized.
Right. I guess that leads me to the idea, my own personal struggles at different times in my life. So one is early specialization in sport. I didn't technically specialize early in judo because I always played lots of sports, but I started going to tournaments at 5 and I went to a lot, and then I went to more, and then we would travel and I would train on a Saturday, and my parents were trying to just be supportive and not understanding the consequence of that. So, at 7 and 8 years old, I would sometimes do judo for 5 hours on a Saturday. And what would happen is you get to 12 years old and you realize this feels like a job, because I've been traveling 3 hours one way to go to a dojo to train for 5 hours every Saturday since I was little. And so I guess the effect of that on that made me at one point think I was going to quit judo. And for whatever reason, my stubbornness or whatever, I didn't. But I guess that would be something that you might touch on a little bit, is like why it's important to keep people having a healthy relationship with the sport, even if they show great talent to perform.
That's so rich and so layered. And to your point, there is a risk of it, ending up to be a little bit like a job. How do I want to answer that? I think the first thing I want to say about it is that everyone's journey is unique because everyone is a unique person, but to honor that there are some people that doing a sport recreationally won't be enough. And I was one of those people. Like, I was really annoyed when I would leave dance class after 4 hours, and I thought we could all stay longer because the building could just stay open longer and let's just dance for 2 more hours. Like, I was quite, frustrated by the fact that I was only dancing 20 hours a week. Right. I was that kid, and that energy level, my parents honored that, that, okay, I guess she wants to go again, or she wants to go longer. And so from the outside, they were getting judgment from their peers going, why are you forcing your kid to do all these dancing and skating things? And they're like, that's not really us. Like she's like, let's go. So I think knowing your child is really, really imperative. And I always say to parents, you'll know if it's too much or the burnout is there if their personality starts to change. All of a sudden they're lethargic. They're more grumpy than usual. They want to sleep more. They're like, their eating gets all weird. That's when you got to check in and see how they're doing personally. But if your kid is like happy-go-lucky and they're off to practice and, the regular ups and downs, but just, if they're still themselves, the Josh that they know, then you're probably in that range of what works for them. Right.
Yeah. And my own situation is, while I say that, and I don't mean this like some horrific life that I led. I love judo. I love, and I play basketball and soccer and rugby and volleyball and all these other sports. But and the other thing is, who's to say that maybe that wasn't just a rut that I got past it. I continued to do judo. I've never gone any period of time in my life. I was allowed on the mats at 3.5. So I have no memory before, and I've done it my whole life. It's like walking to me. So I didn't ever quit. So maybe it's just that, at 12 and 13, it's a funny stage in many people's lives. Maybe that was just the rut that I had, but there is obviously cases where too much specialization early, and it's especially being pressed upon people that can have a real negative consequence. So yeah, I guess like reading the child and seeing how motivated they are to go and how excited they still are for it. High performance sport in particular is definitely not for everyone and shouldn't be for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there as well. I think on the one hand, in order to specialize and become excellent, world class at something, I mean, you're going to have to be off balance. You're going to have, a lot more time and investment into something than the regular person, because that's what makes you, a specialist. And then the other side of it is, how people are doing so much with technology these days. To me, I think about technology in the way I'm coaching. So the technology that's most important to me is I call it simplify to elevate. How can I get this amount of information and simplify it into like a quantum bite size so that athlete gets huge results out of possibly less training or, a training that's very specified. So Skating Success was born out of the idea of taking, let's say, a jump like an axle that takes probably between 8 months and a year and a half to learn on average, and condensing that information into an 8-hour period so that the athlete has all the information they need, and then they're going through the process. And it was an incredible innovation, but it was about thinking of coaching as a technology and evolving it so that maybe we don't have to have the hours of repetition stack up to burnout, but they can be really focused, really intentional.
Right. Yeah. When I think about coaching from kids to teenagers, the one thing that I always think about, so in judo we have Jitak Kyoi, which is maximum, it's like maximum efficiency. And so I think about efficiency in terms of not just our time. Like, you only have so much energy that a child can utilize before they're exhausted for the day. Then they have life, or teenager or adult. They have so many hours a day that they're available. And then there's only so much energy that can be utilized during that period of time. So being as efficient with that time as possible is necessary, because no matter what, even if your gym could be 24/7, that's still only 24/7. And then of that, you only have access to people so much. So yeah, that's one thing that I think about. Like, you could have someone involved 6 hours a day, but it can't be 6 hours a day of sprinting.
Exactly.
So how much of that is video review or different things like that to get that process together? Yeah, you can't just run forever. So I guess in that regard, do you show people in person, having them performing the technique, or are you often introducing them to the specifics of how to perform a technique, like say an axle, which I think is 1.5 rotations? I'm not sure, maybe I'm wrong. I think, or it might be which foot you jump off. You'll
Yes,
know
you
more than me.
nailed it.
Oh, perfect. Is
Yeah.
is it showing them in a classroom setting and then showing them technically, or showing them technically, reviewing it in a sort of a classroom or video review session? How do you do that?
Yeah, the specifics of how we teach an axle or a spin or anything like that is interesting, because it can be a lot of different ways. And there are two pieces that I do consistently with athletes. And the first piece is setting a context for them to learn. So my favorite coaching thing I've ever come across, and I don't remember who it is that said it, so it's anonymous in my mind, but it's, I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care. And that's how kids operate, right? That's how we all operate. Once I know that you care about my outcome and you care about who I am, then I'll actually buy into what you're saying. And now I can get to the information. So setting that context is literally the most important piece of what I do with any client. Then the secondary thing, to your point, do I show them? Do I, do this on the computer? Do I do it in person? That is actually often based on that individual's learning style. So getting them to understand how they learn and learn that as a skill set. And are they more visual? Are they more tactile? Are they auditory? And then drawing that forward from them, it's like the super highway of learning, I find, because if I can get that sense of what, A, they're going to know that I care, and B, they're going to be receiving the information in their own format. Now we are really rolling and we can get somewhere pretty efficiently.
Yeah. The building of the trust, when you put it that way, like that's, as people that have coached a long time, when you look back at an athlete's career that you've worked with, often what you cherish is the bond that was created with the athlete. Much like when you were an athlete, what you often cherish isn't the top of the podium. It's the bond that you had with your coach and often your fellow athletes or even competitors at one time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that, yeah, to be like, my standard is I want to create this trust between us so that they truly know that I'm looking out for their best interest, and everything comes from that place. It just sounds like incredibly healthy, and I've never thought of it exactly that way before. So
I'm so glad to share that with you. It's the thing that has helped me the most, because, in coaching, there's a lot of pressure. You're in my specific realm and what I do in choreography, I'm like an artist that's doing my work in public, and there's kind of like a gun to your head. It's like, you have to get this done. Like, there's no the routine has to be handled in that amount of time. If I fly across the country, it's like, you have 3 days, it's got to happen. It's got to,
right.
And often I'll meet the client for the first time, and it's like, we've got to get to this intimate place of art together in a really short time. So if I don't have mechanisms to gain trust and basically put my ego aside, we don't get that result. And so I've really studied that part of it, mainly as a survival in the industry.
This episode is brought to you by Table Tennis North. They work diligently to connect kids to the beautiful sport of table tennis, regularly going out of their way to teach these skills virtually or in person throughout the territory. Please check out what they're up to by clicking the link below.
Bonus, you're right, it creates amazing relationships.
Right. And so with the role that you're in of working with international athletes, so I guess my question would be, when you're working with someone that you're not super, you don't have a long history with, so you go and you meet this athlete. So how does that go to that place? Like, for people that haven't watched a lot of figure skating, they're incredible athletes doing these jumps and flips and spins at a rate that I could not handle. I don't know what the G forces are, but it would be way too much for me. And then there's a musical component and dancing component. So I guess, like, where does that start? Do you go there with an idea of what you want to do, or do you go, oh, this is the type of thing that they're into musically, and how they're like, how does that go? I guess.
Well, it's pretty cool that you mentioned like the sort of technical prowess of skating. So to give you a context, when somebody does a quadruple jump that you see on TV, the RPM is 400 of the body.
Wow.
So that kind of gives you a sense of like the kind of, the kinds of parameters you have to become if you want to do that. But great question. I love this question about artistic intentionality and the difference of humans. So one of the things that's very, very cool, and when I tell you this, you're gonna think about it again later, which is really fun. Okay. And maybe even take it into your own coaching. So every human has a personal rhythm of movement. And you know this because if I take you on a little adventure, all right, if you're at home with somebody that you know really well, a family member, and you're sitting in another room and you cannot see them at all, but you hear them coming, you know who it is.
Right by their steps. And
yes, you already know who it is. And when I watch someone skate, that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing their natural rhythm and movement style. So I'm actually adapting as the choreographer and the artist to their art and how they naturally move, and trying to give them a sense of power through that, and then adapt that to their routine so that basically there's no way for them to go wrong. There's no wrong step because they're in their own movement style, in their uniqueness. And the part that's tricky is getting people on board. So I'll give you a quick example from a couple of weeks ago. I was working with a young male. He's 13. He's just going through that growth. He's like, I'm too cool for school, this guy. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I have an hour with this kid. How the heck do I meet him and gain his trust and then try to make him like do artistic stuff on top of it? And so I decided to take my energy and lower my energy in a really flat way so that he could kind of rise up. And so I took my skates off, I sat down on the side of the boards, and I looked up at him so that he was literally like taller and stronger than me. And I said directly to him, I said, listen, I have lots of stuff to share with you if you want, but I'm aware that at your age and your stage of the game, it's probably like Fort Knox to get inside your brain. You probably have like, a really strong thing protecting your brain and even your heart.
Mhm.
So you have to decide how much you want to let me in so that I can get to know you enough to give you movement that matches your heart and what you want to do. And so offering it like that, and like basically knocking at the door, right?
Mhm.
Knock, knock. Are you going to allow me in?
Right.
And when I posed it to him that way, it's like he he'd creep the door open a little bit. Okay, maybe. And then by
Right.
the end of the session, the door had blown wide open and we were dancing and skating together and laughing and joking.
Right.
And so it's about that understanding, watching them, who they are naturally, and then kind of asking permission. Can I come in to your world? Right.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting sport because I grew up, my oldest sister did it. My mom used to love watching it. So Brian
Yeah.
Orser and Kurt Browning and people like that. I remember watching them growing up. And it's interesting because you have this incredible trick component in the middle of a musical interaction type of thing. And so when you're, I guess the level of the tricks is dependent on the age and the level that they're competing at. So you would so the next stage would be, would you create the movement that you want and then fit the tricks at the appropriate times and what those levels of those tricks are, or are they built into as you choreograph the entirety of it? Like, do you separate it into sections, or is it sort of built as you go?
I think every choreographer is different on that. Some people like to do a lot of pre-planning and then map out where those elements are going to go, and they listen to the music kind of ferociously and all that. I do it really organically. I've got to be honest. It's basically a channeling. I channel with the skater's movement, and I do have a context in my head of everything that needs to go in the routine. And I write that down on the side so that I come back and double check myself, but it has to organically flow so that those elements, those difficult tricks, to your point, are in the best possible scenario. They feel organic to have them in that moment of the music and that moment in time and space on the ice. And so it's like thinking in 3 dimension and feeling into art that moves, right? So if something, for example, I always tell the athlete, if you feel awkward, it looks awkward, right? So what we have to do is get that movement to feel like it flows. And all of skating, and this might be new to you just because it's not your primary sport, but all of skating is on circles. So everything's on a lean and taking your understanding of like a 90-degree angle. So if I wanted to go towards you, but we were on the ice, I would actually have to take a 90-degree turn and then get to you. That's actually the fastest way. And so understanding the mechanics and the math behind the skating and building that in, but only explaining what needs to happen for that athlete. It just gives me this place where I can create movement that will feel organic to them and support their ability to perform.
To that point, if someone is early in their development, I don't know how early people usually start. When does someone usually start technically figure skating? I guess that could be at a very young age, 4, 5, 6.
Yeah, totally. It can be 4, 5, 6. And then a lot of people start later. So but it can start basically once you can skate forwards and backwards. I know you're going to work on that. Forwards, backwards, stop, turn around, do crossovers. Then you can move into learning, the basics of figure skating and build from there.
Right. And so if someone is getting involved in figure skating, what would you say? Like, you have a child that's heavily motivated to do it and they love it and they think it's really fun. So what would your feedback be to help them down that road? If they're early on, like let's say it's an 8-year-old, they've done a bit of figure skating, they're not highly competitive because they're 8 or 9 years old, but what would you say would be a nice way to get the ball continuing to roll in terms of skill development or just being super comfortable on the ice? Like, where would you guide them to first start to hone which skills, I guess I would say?
I think, it's funny, but I ended up with this benefit accidentally because I started in ballet and then ended up into the world of figure skating. And so I had a lot of hours into being a ballerina by the time I was doing competitions in figure skating, let's say. Mm-hmm. So at the time I had no idea of the benefit. So until I went to go train athletes myself, that's when I saw the gap that was missing. And the gap there is body awareness and full body ability to move. And I'm talking range of movement, right? So as a ballerina, you work with small muscles, you do precision movement, and you repeat it and you practice it over and over and over. You work on flexibility and lots of range of movement. And so when I got to the ice, I was always so confused. How come someone can't just glide? Well, they actually don't have that muscular awareness, that body awareness to hold themselves, to just maybe put their hip in front by an inch or to lift their body. And that was all built in for me. So, if somebody really, really wants a foundation for their athlete, maybe it's not ballet, but it's some type of dance movement where you have to actually use your body as the instrument, and you have to learn how it moves, how it looks when it moves, and be able to kind of command that with a range of movement. So especially as people head into puberty, and you'll know it because a lot of adults, right? They've lost almost all range of movement. They don't even reach with their arm up on a shelf. They get on something and they go like this, right?
Right.
And I'm sorry for those listening. I'm like joking around that I'm up on a shelf and like barely reaching up to get something.
Your hand, right?
Yeah. So range of movement. And I actually did give this advice to people who are older than me that want to learn. They'll see me working out or something like, well, how are you doing this movement? And I'll say to them, if you want to be healthier, move your joints in circular motion, like stretch your range of motion again, see what you can do for range of movement, because then the blood flow happens. And in a skating sense, then the art starts to kick in as well.
Yeah. With range of motion, sort of like muscular development in general, it's like, if you don't use it, you lose it for sure.
Yeah.
It's really big.
Yeah.
The other sport that I would connect heavily to figure skating as well is gymnastics. You look at the floor routine of gymnastics and you see that similar component. You have tricks with music, with a dance component. Is there a number of athletes that transition? Do they transition either way? Do you ever see that? I mean, they're also world-class athletes too, so they're capable of incredible physical feats.
From my experience, it's super rare. It's really not interestingly. It should be.
Right.
It shouldn't be, but I think that although there are similarities, it's identity-wise. I think people that love gymnastics, they love gymnastics, right? And then figure skaters, like if you tell figure skaters often to go to a ballet class, they're like, I'm not a ballerina. I don't want to do that. You have to kind of weave it into their identity on the sport. And I mean, I play with that all the time. I mean, we do like plies with Drake music. You know what I mean? Like it's like, I just like, we're doing working out with, playing the, the weekend, and they have no idea they're doing ballet, right? I just rename everything. But it's like an identity. And people that are, figure skaters are a little bit similar to gymnasts in this, I think there's a daredevil component that isn't quite sane. Like, like really when you break it down, figure skating is like, okay, I have a slippery surface and it's really cold, and I want you to put a sword on your foot, and then I want you to try to jump in the air and land. And don't wear any kind of padding or support or no, that's not cool. Just throw yourself and try it.
And the surface is like concrete too.
Oh yeah.
It's
like
not
it
exactly
doesn't make sense, right? No. Like when you're logistical. And actually I think that plays into more of the early maturation in the sport than anything, because as people come into the sport later on, they're always afraid to fall. And you cannot learn to figure skate without falling. So I think that's why young kids are actually better at learning it younger. It's a big, I don't know if I answered your question though.
Well, you did. I was just, the main thing I was curious about is I just see as a non-gymnast, non-figure skater, is ballerina unisex, or is there another term?
Yeah. Ballet dancer. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm none of those. But there's just such a natural connection to all three of them that I was curious how much transition there is between them, because they seem so natural. In the same sense though, people watch UFC and they know that I'm a judoka and they're like, oh, you must watch that. And I'm like, no, I'm just a judo bum. Like I just like judo. Like I have no interest in being punched or punching someone in the face. For those that don't know, there's no striking in judo. But the other part that you brought up is one of my two real passions in terms of judo is high performance. It just because I feel like such a challenge. It's so challenging to help people get to such an extreme level of performance that it challenges you in creative ways, even in something that's not necessarily creative in this artistic sense. You have to be creative to help that person continue to improve after they've done something 20 years is a beautiful challenge. The other end of the spectrum that I'm super passionate about is learning how to fall. It's such an important skill.
Yes.
I recently read some information on the CDC that's mind-boggling. So they estimated in 2015, it was $50 billion in the United States alone in hospital bills from injuries. They estimate that in the year 2030, 7 Americans will die an hour from falling. An hour, 7 an hour.
What?
Yeah. Yeah, it's real. Crazy. Crazy. And then it's like 95% of hip fractures are from people not knowing how to fall. The vast majority of head injuries are from people not knowing how to fall. People that fall and get injured are far less likely to continue on in sport or be as active or go to the grocery store. 800, what was the number? It was like 800,000 people a year are hospitalized from an injury, 300,000 of which are elderly, which isn't unexpected. That means 500,000 people a year that aren't of the elderly are hospitalized in the United States in 1 year alone. And so
It breaks my heart.
Yeah, it's crazy. My own mother never did judo and she fell and broke her hip when she was about 64 years old. So it's like and it to the same point, I've fallen countless times and for the most part, I'm doing pretty good. So so I guess that's a huge component, like knowing you're going to fall. I don't know how much you train. There must be something, but how much you train people to learn how to fall safely. Like I always think judo has a monopoly on falling because we throw each other a lot. So we do it a lot. Yeah. But obviously learning how to fall safely on ice must be trained in some way.
Yeah. I mean, the best part about ice is you can go with it. You can go with the flow of it. So it's learning to harness the ability to, as you touch down, to relax enough that the ice can take you. Mm-hmm. You know, it's when people are very tense. Yeah, and to your point, when people don't know how to fall, they're very tense, and then it makes you brittle, and you hit something, and it just like, it's like anything. The reverb is not there. Mm-hmm. So I always say, for example, my analogy with athletes is, okay, I have a basketball and I have a teapot. Now, both are very strong. Okay. The basketball is super strong. You can throw it against the wall, you do whatever, no problem. Right. And the teapot is also strong. It has really hot boiling water in it. It can hold it for a long time. It's strong. It can last a long time. But if you drop both of those, which one is going to break? Right. And so we want to be the basketball. We want to be relaxed enough and enough sort of stretch in our ability to flow with the bounce that we go with that flow. And it's, you're right. It's a trained event. And fortunately in skating, like I said, with the circles, you know, you can really allow yourself to fall and get up. I even have a fun maneuver where I do it on purpose, like go full speed and fall and slide and get up, just to show them you can really, you know, go with the flow of the ice. So
right. Yeah. The lacking rigidity or being able to be calm enough to not be rigid when you fall is so important. Like I always tell people, you know, if you're falling straight forward and you stick your arm out to land on it, your body weight landing on a small joint is the video that you don't want to watch.
Yeah.
It's not fun. So it's like you have to do it enough that you feel confident that it becomes a subconscious act so that fear doesn't take over and you don't act in a way that you might not know is not for your best interest.
Okay, but funny story about falling really quick.
Okay. Yeah. Of course.
I took it too far because I learned a different sport as an adult. So when I was 25, I was like, I'm going to take up tennis because tennis could be like a lifelong sport and right? And I'm in my lesson with my coach. And of course, my hand-eye coordination, having never been trained my whole life, was very poor. So he would like serve the ball to me and I would miss the ball, but my body went, well, we missed. So I would fall down.
No.
On the court. I like miss and fall, like straight up. Right. And eventually he started getting red and he was like, he gave me the tennis finger, which is just the come here to the net. I need to talk to you. Right. You know, moment. And I was so eager. I was like, I run up to my coach, like, what? He goes, there's no falling in tennis. There's no falling in tennis. I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, look at those ladies. And there were these, more aged ladies having their quartet of tennis, and they were dying laughing at me. They're just like, look at this girl. What is she doing falling all over the tennis court? He's like, stop it. You're embarrassing me. And anyway, so you have to be sport specific falling.
Right. Yeah. It sort of reminds me to a degree when you're a kid and you're playing catch with your friend and you want the catch to be spectacular. So you're like, throw it a little bit in front of me so I can make a diving catch, So every time you catch the ball, you're like, and then you'll catch it and then fall down as if you jumped for it. Like you want to be the center fielder of the Toronto Blue Jays, and it's totally unnecessary and it looks ridiculous.
Grass stains.
So everywhere. I can only imagine an athletic adult playing tennis and like corkscrewing onto the ground every time they miss the ball. It would probably be fantastic to see.
I should have had a TikTok back then. I would have been, viral.
Yeah, you'd be super famous. Super famous. Yeah. Everybody would be doing it.
Yeah, man.
Put it to some song. So I guess the next thing that I was curious about is confidence is such a fickle, interesting, necessary component in performance. And so first we understand is when an athlete trusts their coach, there's a confidence that naturally occurs from that because they believe that coach is helping them. And so they will improve. But what other things do you find helps to build the confidence in an athlete that you're working with?
I love this question. I'm so glad you are taking it this direction, because I think that is the point of sport. Like, we have sport as a place to learn confidence, which is trust yourself that no matter what you're up against, you will figure it out. That's what it is, right? Confidence comes from, okay, if I feel the worst feeling in the world, I trust myself to be able to deal with that feeling and move through it. If I lose in front of everybody, I can trust myself that I will get up and take my bow and get off the ice and still have my own back. And that's all we're really doing for the amount of time someone is doing their sport. We're building that with them and reminding them that they can figure it out. They will get through this next thing. And they're going to basically build their confidence muscles through those pieces of adversity, which I think that's the only real point of sport.
Yeah, I had a conversation with Paul Jordan. He played professionally volleyball in Europe for 14 years, was on the national team for 15 years, and is a Volleyball Canada Hall of Famer and as good a career as you can have in volleyball. And we were talking about the end of the career. And the part that's interesting to me is what I learned doing judo my whole life is that it's so difficult. But trying to achieve these incredible goals is so difficult, and you're humbled so often that other aspects of life at times can seem not monotonous, but they become less of a mountain because you're like, okay, this test is hard, but trying to defeat this person at this event was really hard. So if I put some of this work in, I should be okay.
Yeah.
And the other part, the negative side of it was we're often so tied to the identity of being this athlete in this specific realm that when we leave it, it is a very it can be very brutal. It can be really brutal to navigate life after. But then again, where it may come back to help us, it maybe helped create this difficult situation, but it also helps solve it, is you can feel like, I don't know where my life's going. I don't know what I'm doing because I'm not that athlete anymore. I'm not the person that they know of as the judo person. But because we've had so many challenges and worked through them our whole lives, that at some point for me is that at some point you realize, well, that's just a challenge again. It's just a challenge to find that again. And all we've done our whole lives in athletics is challenge ourselves. So this is just the new one.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. And what you're bringing up on in that point around life after sport is so great for anyone listening. So I'm really grateful that you're talking about it openly. My business partner, Stephanie Hanlon, is literally the coach for this. She teaches life after sport and works with Olympic level athletes, NHL athletes, business people, and does exactly the work to help prepare them for who they are going to become in their new pieces of identity. And I've seen the work from the inside, so I know how powerful it can be. And when I faced it myself was actually a kind of a weird scenario where I had been doing choreography for years, running my business, all the things. And I just felt like, strong and powerful. And then I broke my foot and faced the power of being humbled, right? Brought to your knees, like, okay, how are you going to choreograph now? It's the beginning of the season. And I just had to surrender to, all right, what is my identity when I'm not able to push myself and skate for 10 hours straight, or I'm not able to show up and have all the energy because the healing was taking 12 hours of sleep a night. And what I realized through that, which ended up being an incredible experience, was, oh, what I'm bringing is way more valuable than just my ability to show how I skate or just my ability to perform. It's like my energy and my intention and my connection with the other person is incredible. And that's where I was really honed in and realigned, let's say, spiritually realigned with the purpose of what I do. And ironically, 2 or 3 years later, oh, oops, we have to do it all on Zoom. Oh, well, I've done that before, sitting still and doing choreography. And all of a sudden I have a whole new realm for my business because I can do all of this online from this chair. So you don't know the gifts of going through the work. And that's really the gift of sport. And I think, to your point, life after and through the identity of sport, it can become another layer of your confidence.
Yeah. And the other part, I guess, to be an olive branch is, I think people often feel, if you don't have close friends or whatever, everyone feels lonely or isolated in a sense. When you're going through a struggle, it feels like it's just you and that other people might not feel that struggle. And my experience from my friends and people that I've met and had the opportunity to meet and hear stories of, and people like Adam Van Couverden, who talks about post-Olympic depression, who was an Olympic champion rower for Canada, is that it doesn't matter if you achieved all of your goals, some of your goals, or you were dramatically short of your goals. If you chased something so passionately, the same thing can happen to everyone, because I was not an Olympic athlete. Yeah. I didn't get close to the goals that I had set for myself as an athlete. Yeah. And that doesn't matter, because at the end, when I stopped, I still felt the same as, some NHL hockey players do when they retire, and they might have been the best hockey player in the world. They're still searching for their identity post the NHL career, that you're so tied to it. You've done it your whole life. Like when people talk about it, the Olympic cycle, and they say, oh, they've trained for this for 4 years, I always laugh. Find me the athlete that trained for something for 4 years and made it to the Olympics.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone got involved at a young age. Maybe it wasn't even that sport, but everybody was involved chasing this for a long time to make it to the Olympic level. This is not a 4-year cycle. It's 4 years between skating, the games.
Sorry. Yeah. In figure skating too, that in that moment of the 4-year cycle culminating, when you take off into the air on that jump, you have to get into your position in 0.2 of a second. So you have 20% of a second to get your body to do the thing that you trained your whole life for. And if you miss that 0.2, you likely miss the podium.
Right. And
you can't fall at the Olympics, get on the podium.
Yeah. And the thing that's wild, the connection, I guess, to judo and figure skating that I think similarly is that way, is when you lose in judo, you're literally picking yourself up off the ground.
Yeah.
When you fall in figure skating, there's something to, like, as most people are aware, your physiological positioning and your psychological or your mental attitude in a moment are so connected. So when you lose and you're picking yourself up off the ground, it feels really hard. It's like, it's really tough. And when, just like, when someone walks into a meeting and they walk in with their chest pumped out and their shoulders back and they have great posture and they walk into the room, they look confident. They also feel confident from that position. When you lose and you're literally on the ground, you feel like that.
Yeah. It's a flattening of the ego.
Right. Yeah. It's as humble as you can be.
You're down. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I guess that leads me to the idea, like I like to give the reference to my athletes when they're walking to the mats, is everything that you do when you're entering this, you're about to perform. It doesn't matter the sport. It's not just that you have to physically do something. It's a performance as well. You have to exude confidence to your opponent or to the judges or to whoever it is. But when you walk to that, creating confidence is connected physically. So the reference that I like to give is, if I was to offer you $1 million cash, although that's not very much money nowadays. So if I was to offer you some Elon Musk money, a couple $1 billion, and I said, all that I need you to do is give me genuine tears. Most people's first thing that they do, hunch their back, lean their head over. They first put themselves in a physical position to cry. Yeah. Then they picture something that's horrific or that has happened, or make something up in their head to try to create that emotion. But the first action is a physical one. And so if you're going to be confident as an athlete, your first action has to be to show that you're physically confident. It's not just here. Like, those two things are very connected.
Wow. What a beautiful way to explain it to your athletes. It reminds me, I had a routine with a young girl, and we decided she was in her very broody teenage time.
Right.
And so I said, well, what do you want to express? And she's like, well, something dark, something, and so we actually choreographed a piece where she was at a funeral, and she was going to portray the fact that she didn't know who was in the casket until she saw that it was, in her mind, her father or something like this. Right. Mm-hmm. And she totally agreed to this. She wanted to do this. Like, it was like very artistically deep for her.
Right.
And I said to her one practice, I said, this would be so much better if you were actually crying by the end of the performance. And she said, I'm doing it. So she started practicing exactly what you're talking about, doing her body, doing all the things. And I had to get out of the way. And when she would go to perform it, we did about a 20-minute window where that was her process. She would pace around in the waiting room and literally get herself ready to cry. And she would produce tears by the end of that performance. Wow. On cue. And and my only job was, when she come off, to make her laugh, bring it back and reconnect. But she was so committed to this idea. And I just thought it was beautiful, because she was then in total confident control of her ability and her performance. I thought it was really, really neat.
Did she get into acting later? Do we now know her as Scarlett Johansson, or?
Yeah, I don't know, but I have another girl who I always said was an actor, and that was another crying thing that we wanted to do. She could do all these different things, and yeah, she is in acting now. So I think that there's definitely a component of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I always find that connection so fascinating. I don't remember when it came to me to try to utilize it to my athletes more. But, I'm always trying to find ways to help them be confident, because, our body is a puppet to our mind. And so if this thing's not ready to work and ready to be confident, and for you to truly believe you can do it, it doesn't matter what you're physically capable of if you're not mentally prepared.
Yeah.
And then I guess the next thing is because you were talking about her preparing in this emotional way to do something emotional, do you often help athletes to create their preparation in terms of performance on the day of, on the moments leading up to it? I think that's something that sometimes is overlooked by some people, is that they go, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, I do this. I train all the time. I'm really good. So on Saturday, when I go to do my competition, I just go and perform. And I think sometimes it's undervalued, creating your pattern or your preparation, that this is what you do all the time. So you have your way of doing it, and everyone's going to be individual, but do you often help athletes with that part of the process?
Yeah, I absolutely do. So to kind of circle it back to the beginning and how I got involved, because I really didn't think I would ever do coaching. I thought I was done with the sport. Like I was one of those, I was like, okay, put my skates in the closet and go to university. But when I found that, the interest I had in helping people, and basically what I call authentic empowerment for others, right? That lined up so well with the sport that I realized, this skill set matches that skill set. And that's when I realized I'm a personal performance coach and a choreographer, and all of the things I do line up with that. And people have said to me, well, maybe you should just split it off. So this is when you're doing choreography and this is when you're doing mental performance coaching. And I'm like, well, I can't really split the yin and the yang, right? Because to your point, how do you show up and emotionally show your heart to an audience without being mentally prepared and present? It's impossible. So to me, it's a connected thing. And the athletes that I serve they really know that, they kind of joke about it. Like, Jadene's going to make sure you're doing well as a person first, athlete second, and results third. So that's how we go through the process. And it's a daily practice. And then we build it in towards competition. And I always folded into their language and their awareness in layers. Like one really good example is I had a young athlete, she made like a games team, like an Alberta games kind of thing, right? So she's going to be going as a young kid with a different coach and no parents and all that on a team. And so for probably about 6 weeks beforehand, every week it was like, okay, if this happens, this is how you deal with it. If this happens, this is how you deal with it. And we even got to the point where we practiced what would happen if nobody told her the schedule and she didn't even get the on ice warm up. You know, she had to just run in and hit the ice, take 1 minute, and then skate her performance. Right. And basically by the end of all these funny things, she was so prepared. She was like rolling her eyes at me, like, are you kidding me? But she came back from the event and went, yeah, they could have thrown anything at me. I was ready. So yeah, I always like to fold those things into coaching.
Right. And if you've ever felt unprepared for a test, which probably everyone ever has, is you may even know the material, but the anxiety that's created from feeling unprepared is like handcuffs. You can't access the information. So just feeling like you're ready for the challenge and any challenge that it is, and having this routine, and the routine can be short, brief, long, whatever it is, but just knowing I have in my back pocket, I have this routine. When I'm finished this routine, that routine might be what you eat for breakfast. That could be a part of it. Which I always find is important. Like, as we talked earlier about food, we both have such a strong appreciation for it. Is finding the food. All of those things lead to you feeling like it's just another day. And I really like the idea as a baseball fan. Part of the reason baseball players can do such amazing things is because they play 162 games and they play 5 to 6 days in a week. So if they have a really bad game, well, tomorrow's just another game because they play again the next day and the next day. So when we, you can talk about putting people on a pedestal, but putting competitions on a pedestal, all that does is make you feel overwhelmed in the moment. So I would often go through a practice of making my athletes feel like every Saturday is a tournament day. So when it becomes a tournament day, it's Saturday. That's what we do every Saturday.
Yeah.
So they would create that tournament routine.
I love that. Actually, baseball, one of my favorite sports to watch, because I just find it so relaxing, is one of my favorite analogies for sport in general. So figure skaters are always trying to land the jump every single time in the performance. And kids get really hard on themselves. Oh, I missed my jump. I didn't do my clean thing. And I say to them, okay, well, in baseball, a really good batting average is like 350. Like
you're real good.
Like, you are really good. And they go, what does that mean? And I say, that means you get paid millions of dollars to hit the ball 3 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
They're like, what? I'm like, no, actually, less than 50%. If you got a less than 50% in school, how would you feel about that? You wouldn't be paid millions of dollars, but that's how hard it is to be that good. So when you expect yourself to land your jump 10 out of 10 times, you're not being realistic with what the actual thing is you're being asked to do. So I always give them that little bit of reference point of if you're a million gazillionaire pitcher, when you get up to bat and you hit the ball 3 out of 10 times, your coach is like, I got the best guy in the league, right? So
yeah, setting expectations. I think about it. I often make this reference when I'm talking to my friends about movies, is expectations are the killer. So when I watched The Matrix 2, my life was crushed because I watched The Matrix 1 and it's one of my favorite movies ever. Totally. So when you have people with unrealistic expectations of how they should perform, they are setting themselves up to beat themselves up mentally for this lack of performance. No one in baseball history has ever batted anywhere near 500 for a season. That would be the greatest player ever. And that means more than half the time they lose. In judo at the international scene, to the same extent, the average success rate at the world and Olympic level and Grand Slam, Grand Prix level is 10.5% success rate of a throw.
Wow.
So 90% of your attacks will be unsuccessful in judo. 90%.
Hey, this is so good. We should have you and I should do like a little sports stat thing on the side sometime and just throw these things out there and share it with all the athletes we know, because come on.
Yeah, that's crazy. 10%. And that's not to say that people aren't better or worse. So there's one judoka from Japan who's a total freak. His success rate of techniques at an Olympic Games once was like 39%. But a Canadian named Jessica Klimkate, first ever Canadian to medal at the Olympics as a woman in judo, also a world champion, second ever world champion from Canada. Her success rate of her throws at the international level is 6.5%. She's a world champion and an Olympic medalist. And as good as anyone on the tour, and her success rate's 6.5%. And that doesn't mean her technique's bad or anything like that, but it there's many reasons for that, but it just shows, like, to think that every time you attack, you're going to throw somebody, or every time you jump, you're going to land it. You're just setting yourself up for disappointment, because that's not going to happen. So know that that's okay. You can still be the best in the world. She's a world champion.
People give up so much more easily than they need to if they want to get success at anything. And I think that's the whole, again, talking earlier, the whole point of sport. You know, like the 12-year-old who goes out there to do a figure skating competition and falls on her face in front of the whole rink. And nowadays, all the results, every detail of her results is not only online and available for everybody, but usually the video is too. It's completely transparent. Mm-hmm. So I always say to their parents, you know, well, I'm spending a lot of money on this. And I'm like, yeah, so when your daughter's 20 and she goes for a job interview, her first thought is, yeah, at least I'm wearing pants.
Right.
Like, at least I'm not half naked and falling in front of everyone. Like, these are real things.
Right.
And the toughest people I've ever met are these young figure skaters. It's just like, they have faced this adversity, this falling, this ability to face challenge in public so many times that by the time they do those other things in life, it's like, yeah, I got this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a universal for sport. You push yourself in ways that you didn't think were possible, and the challenges of everyday life, while not mundane, are achievable. You can conquer those challenges, and you know that you can, because you've done it so many times before. Yeah. And I think some of the impossible things that we do as people, we often do them so young that we forget. We forget that we learned a language and started to speak to people. We forget that we learned how to walk without anyone giving us a course or having an instructor. We just do it. That's seemingly impossible. I'm trying to learn French now as an adult, and it's very difficult. But we did that as infants. You know, we learned to communicate in so many different ways. We learned to walk. And sport is sort of like a reminder that you can push yourself in those ways. We're capable of so much more than we think. We're ready to hit the eject button sometimes, and sport can show us that we can do otherwise, which is pretty wild. The other thing that's more commonly spoken about, or more commonly noticeable, I guess, is distraction, I think, in modern life. And so, do you find it difficult? Is it different now? Or do you find, because the majority of the people that you work with are so passionate, that they are present in the moment of what they're doing for the most part?
Okay, so ironic, because as you said the word distraction, I'm realizing my next meeting is going to start. So I'm going to text them. So pause this recording.
Sure.
Often in life now, our regular 2022, distraction has an effect, but you don't see it right away. And so they'll continue to be distracted for a long time before they realize, oh no, I've been on Instagram for an hour and a half, right? Right. But in skating, if you're distracted when you go up on the air, you will fall and hurt yourself. Like, it's like very quick feedback.
Right.
So that's, again, the discipline and the practice of the sport. I mean, when you get on ice with a blade, you can just fall on your face on your toe picks, even if you know how to skate. If you're distracted and you're not being aware of the skating, funny things happen. And so that's one of my favorite things about it. To your point, it's like distraction is so prevalent, but I feel like figure skating brings you back right now. Or judo, someone's going to come after you. Well, if you're not paying attention, hey, you're vulnerable. So I think that's another beautiful side effect about conditioning the mind around presence, because you don't really have a choice.
Yeah. And then what I found now is I rarely practice the sport that I love, because I'm coaching it all the time. It's probably similar for yourself. Is I rarely do it. So then I'm present in coaching, but then I'm not present in a physical activity for myself necessarily. So then it's sort of finding things that I have now to make me present in the moment. And as a working professional, leaving your work at work, no matter how passionate, no matter how much in love with the work you are, you can't carry it around with you all the time. So when I go home, it's very easy for me in my brain to think about how I can make this one kid better and this other grant that I have to do and this school that I'm talking to about putting judo in the school system, that goes home with me really easily. So what I found now, which is also part of our, again, it always comes back to food with me, but is that going home and being like, I want to make something good to eat. I want to make something that challenges me and is fun, means that I can't be thinking about my work when I'm at home, because if I am, then I'm going to burn what I'm making, or I'm not going to prepare it properly and it's not going to turn out. So it's like, I guess maybe I got to that place from remembering how sport made me present, but how that's such an important thing to plug back into now for me, for my life, to not let that bother me, because you can't think about work, even if it's the best thing ever. You can't think about it 24/7.
Absolutely. I think also it's a respect thing. So I work with an athlete, I'm teaching them something, and then they ask me, well, do you think about my program when you go home at night? And I say, never. I never think about it. Why? Because it's yours. This is your skating. This is your opportunity. It's you take it home with you. It's beautiful. I go home to my life and do my thing. And then I'm fresh and present and filled up to come share with you again. It's a respect thing. I don't, I don't think that I need to hold on to everybody's things. And also it limits my capacity. If I want to serve the world, I want to serve and make a huge impact with millions of people, which I do. I can't hold millions of people's dreams in my fingertips. And it's also not respectful to do that. It's your dream. I'm part of your team, but you're the center of your skating success, right?
Right. Yeah. I think for me, I love the idea of that. And I think putting into play might sometimes be, for different people, more challenging than that sounds. But maybe if I just remind myself of that, because it's true. It's like utilize, and when you save those moments for the moments that they're the most poignant or important, you're going to be so connected in that moment, because you have fatigue, work fatigue or coaching fatigue or whatever that's naturally going to happen, and that's more likely to happen when you carry it home with you. And then when you do that, then you're not as engaged in the moments when you are with that person.
Yeah. And it does come down to respect. You respecting yourself,
right,
your space, right? Let's just face it, they're not listening to what I'm saying. Like, that's why I never worry about screwing up what I say. And I do this like morning show live every day of the week. And I just go off the cuff every day and share what I can, because they're not listening to what I'm saying. They're feeling my presence and they're feeling the support, and then they're grabbing knowledge and they're going, and it's theirs. And that's how I really view a lot of human interaction. It's, if I carry this around with me all day, it doesn't make it better.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing is so much communication. I don't know, you might know this more than me, you probably do, but I don't know what the number is, but it's like, what percentage of communication is nonverbal? It's a huge amount.
93.
Look at that. See, you'd know. It's 93%. So you get so much from the energy of someone, so much of that. It's not just the words that I utilize or don't utilize. It's like the energy that you feel from someone. And the thing that's amazing is maybe we're getting better at connecting virtually, for one thing. And the fact that the camera doesn't make you a blurry blob on the screen is another thing. But if we were on the old cathode ray tube
it's like
monitor, and you're like, you look like a Tetris symbol, maybe it's a little different, but
I'm just an NFT, don't worry. No.
Right. Yeah, exactly. But the ability, I'm maybe that makes it easier to connect now virtually, but like even in a virtual sense, even with us thousands of kilometers apart, you can still feel that energy from someone. And so much of that isn't what I'm saying.
Absolutely. I was teaching a seminar weekend one time, and the first day I got so excited. I just gave it my all and I went all out and and I woke up and I had no voice.
Right.
It was gone. So when the 40 kids showed up, I had no choice. It was like, there was no projection going to happen.
Right.
And so I taught them through just movement and just going around and showing them and doing, and you know what? That was probably over 15 years ago, and it has become a staple of how I teach. I've now used that technique hundreds of times with big groups, especially because telling people to be quiet, I'm talking to you. totally different than if you don't say a thing and they have to tune in and they have to watch and they have to whisper to each other, what's she doing, what's going on? And it transforms the space.
Right.
And it creates a beautiful communication loop that they don't forget. So now I've shared one of my biggest secrets. Anyone listening to the podcast can try that out.
Reminds me of a parenting thing. If you don't want your kids to hear what you're saying, say it really loud and they aren't going to pay attention. If you want them to know what you're saying, whisper it to the person beside you. You know, they start to listen so much carefully. You can whisper something to someone else and your sibling or your child, they'll come in from a different room and they somehow heard it, but you'll tell them out loud something and it just goes right by. So it's like, there's something about like people connecting when you can have a really good energy level, but when you're soft spoken and trying to impart some information, it somehow comes with more import, or that has maybe more depth sometimes.
Yeah. It's more, you can listen to it better as well.
Right. It's not like berating someone.
Yeah.
I guess I'll just close on saying that it was awesome to have you on, and thank you for all your fantastic energy and all the knowledge that you imparted. And I hope to personally be able to utilize some of what we spoke about today and speak in the future. And I'll definitely send you my Detroit style pizza recipe. And
I love it. I can't wait.
And I hope you enjoyed it as well.
Yes, I did. And great to meet you. We will chat.
You as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.